When you have as much free time as a lich does, you begin to question things. Why do the realms work in the way that they do? Sure, it's the will of the gods, but why are their whims to be followed and not my own? Is age the greater implier of power? In which case, this is a forever losing game. All will forever remain below the first to obtain immortality. So it can't be such. Perhaps it is simply raw power, in which case I should stop at nothing to gain more. Gaining more followers would come as part of that course naturally, so that I can maintain my current power base. And to this end, they ought to worship me as well. I think that would be best for my reign. You get the point. I'm not going to continue this analogy. In short, it is inevitable that they will consider themselves a god, or a godlike being, or they deserve such titles. Because of this, they are always seeking ways to become more powerful than they were before. There's never an upper ceiling to power. And to be fair, this is actually the norm. Let's be honest with ourselves for a second. Everyone and everything wants more power within reason. We give ourselves limits on what's an acceptable way to gain power. Lich's only exception is that, well, they don't have these limits. But I'm not talking about normal liches today. We have already had that discussion. No, today I wish to speak of the next step. Depending on the lich, this is their final task and transformation of power, or something they are deeply afraid of becoming. What I wish to speak of today is the demi-lich, the next step in lichdom. See, it's actually a little bit of a contradiction here, but it is inevitable for a lich to one day become a demi-lich, and they are much weaker than the normal lich after they've hit this state, yet many ancient and powerful liches seek to become one after some heavy preparation time. That is the important part, the prep time. So before I get into these very powerful liches, I'm going to first talk about the more weaker ones, the ones that just happen to become one. But a demi-lich is made when a regular lich stops feeding souls to its phylactery. That's essentially it, the only requirement to become one. It's not clear how long this takes to happen, or if it is a gradual or immediate change, but it is a guarantee that they will become one should they stop sacrificing souls. Should this happen, their already frail body will decay and turn to dust, leaving basically just their floating skull, and sometimes it doesn't even float. They are still perfectly capable of speech like they were before, although now they are considerably more insane, which is actually hard to believe and quite interestingly the case. It's quite common for them to just burst out into an argument with themselves, or singing randomly, or to have a whole performance where they play every part, including the heckling audience, or just attack someone they were previously working with at random. It's insanity, magical insanity at that. By definition, it's unpredictable. Because they lack their old bodies now, they will however lose quite a lot of their spells, in fact almost all of them. They will get a swath of new powers that I will go into detail on later, but the trade-off for the most part is just not worth it at all. Luckily for them and nobody else, it's actually quite simple for them to return back to a normal lich form. All it requires is one more soul sacrifice into their phylactery. The hard part is just getting someone to do it. In fact, it's so hard for them to do it on their own that most of them have to trick someone, typically a naive adventurer, into doing this for them. Something that sadly works far too often for you to keep hope in people. The amount of stories I have heard where some young druid or the like has wanted to help the funny laughing skull is shocking. But now for the more interesting ones, the ones that did this willingly. For I was not kidding when I said this is the next step in lichdom, and if a lich does pull this off, they become so much more terrifying for it. As if they weren't a problem enough already. But this stage is a gamble for them, not as much as becoming a lich in the first place, but a lot more of a struggle for them, because it plays off of their own ambition. See, there is another ritual they must perform again in order to regain control over themselves and give themselves most of their old lich powers back. The part that makes this hard for them is that they have to do it when they are in their demi-lich state, and while their minds are even more insane than usual, it's quite common for them to just follow their own smaller whims instead. And getting distracted all the time. The more ambitious they are, the more they want and crave things, the more likely they are to just get distracted. And if they're distracted long enough, they forget how to do it. Which is actually funny, because all they need to do to become an empowered demi-lich is the creation of soul gems, a magical gem that stores the soul of a person inside. They actually have to make several of these and keep them close to them at all times. Many of them encrust them into their clothes or jewelry, and some are known to just put them within their empty eye sockets or in place of their fallen out teeth. After all, they are but a skull at this point. I can't tell you the exact process of making these soul gems, however. It is a very complicated process from what I understand, but it does just require magically inserting something into a gem, so it's probably on par to making a phylactery. The reason for this is that they are storing and consuming the power of the souls like the phylactery, but unlike the phylactery, the power goes directly into them, making them even stronger and able to do the things they were before again. I should note that these soul gems can store a lot more souls within them, and can be reused should something happen to the soul within, like it being consumed. But after they have gained the needed amount of full soul gems, they will regain most of their old powers, and they often reconstitute their old bodies again as well. Well, sort of. What they do is they gather up the dust and tiny fragments of what is gone, and sort of magically hold them together. Because they're so free and in control of this, that they often make themselves a little taller, and put gold and other valuable gems within themselves to make themselves more appealing. This makes them look like they're fully constituted again, and back to normal, and you'll be completely surprised when they just randomly turn into a cloud of dust. See, one of the first things they will gain after doing this is becoming temporarily incorporeal, although they use this more so for dimension hopping than going through walls and the like. And no, I still don't have time to get into how dimension hopping and incorporeality are linked. One day, I promise. But it might be hard for you to tell what is a lich or a demi-lich once they have achieved this empowered status. So the only really good tell is the level of detail. See, if they have, say, a golden skull with platinum filigree and all details around their emeralds for eyes and rubies for teeth, you probably have an empowered demi-lich on your hands. So the first thing, and really only indicator you have, is to identify the soul gems, which might be pretty hard. I imagine many liches have tried to trick people into thinking they're a demi-lich by just putting gems everywhere. Although this wouldn't work on another lich or demi-lich, they'd sniff that out immediately. Well, they don't sniff anymore, but you get what I mean. But let me get into their powers. I will specify if it is a regular demi-lich or an empowered demi-lich at the end of each of them, so that you understand what can do what. First, they have a howl ability that can cause dread into your very soul, akin to what a normal lich's gaze ability can do. The difference is that this is a little easier to resist, but can affect entire groups of people at once instead of one at a time. This is possessed just by the regular demi-liches. The empowered ones go back to the gaze ability. Second is their deadly life drain, which both of them possess, but it works on really anyone within a short radius of them. They don't even have to touch you, they just need to get near you. It only really affects 3 people at a time, and it will sap at your very life force and give it back to the lich, healing it for all the damage it has done. Second is their ability to use the dust their bodies have become as a weapon. While both of them are technically capable of doing this, the lesser one is far more likely to do so by a mile. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen an empowered demi-lich do this. But this ability it's actually quite funny. It involves the lich just throwing the dust that their remains have become around, blinding you, essentially using their body like it's a pocket sand attack. They also gain the ability to drain the very energy within you, reducing your soul and your very life force down permanently, damaging your maximum potential. The only way to undo this dark effect is to have a powerful, holy spell like Greater Restoration cast on you. This is held by both types of Demilich. They also gain a unique type of curse, a vile one indeed. If affected by it, it saps at your very power, at your very core, making you both worse at attacking things, but also from saving you from anything. Your reflexes, strengths, and even your wits are affected by this. And it may take some time for you to shrug it off, and even if you do so, there's nothing stopping them from trying it again, although I find it takes them a while to do this, and so they rarely do so. This is also something both types of Demiliches can do. But lastly, and something only the empowered ones can do, is their ability to just trap a soul in one of their soul gems. If you are attacked by this and are unprepared for it, you are in for a grim fate indeed, as you will instantly be captured into the gem, as if you cease to exist in a moment. Even if you are ready for it, you will be blasted by a huge amount of necrotic energy, and if that brings you down, you will be trapped the same anyway. Once trapped in a gem, you have about 24 hours before your soul is utterly consumed and gone forever, unless that Lich's current body is destroyed and the soul gem is crushed. Then that person will be reformed as if nothing happened, and in fact, depending on their magical aptitude, they might not have even noticed any change in time. They might be mid-swing and wondering what just happened. I also need to remind you that an empowered Demilich also gets back most of their old Lich's abilities, along with their spell casting. And at this point, an empowered Demilich just has so many abilities and powers that, I'm not gonna lie, it's an impossibility to predict their fighting style unless you have faced them before, which I would doubt you would survive, no offense. It is for all these reasons that the amount of Demiliches that have achieved this status can probably be counted on one person's fingers alone. With all of the stories and legends around them, it is impossible for you to have not heard of them. I assure you, they are so tiny in number that you can take solace in the fact that if you ever go up against one, you'll never be alone. In fact, when one does appear, often whole organizations and armies team up to stop them. Fortunately, almost every one of them is the fallen lesser Demilich, which is often the result of them just neglecting their own body requirements. After all, it is a purely magical effect, and their bodies don't warn them of it. Many wizards, myself included, find ourselves up all night studying and reading stuff. If my own body didn't tell me when I was hungry or thirsty, I would neglect to do so, and I would probably succumb if I lost these senses. Although in my case it would just be my death, and not turning into a lesser funny skull. But anyway, for my tale of the Demilich, I think I shall speak on the one that has been tricked and used more like an asset than a grand foe. See, one of my rivals is a green dragon by the name of Kazkara, who has somehow managed to convince an insane Demilich that she is their relative, despite the fact that he was a dwarf in life and that she is, well, a giant green dragon. It somehow worked. I judged her heavily for this, of course, and thought it was immoral to use a dark creature in such a way, until she reminded me that I actually have a relative that is a lich. And I will admit that did put me in my place a little, until I realized that's why she did it. And in fact, I think she was just jealous, and wanted a lich of her own, and that's why she did this. And I know this is the case, because I read her mind! What annoys me the most about this is that the little Demilich's help has actually been quite invaluable from time to time, and I've actually had to hide its presence from the authorities on more than one occasion. Oh, don't look at me like that, I've done worse on many occasions. It's just, I can easily see this biting me back later. I don't know why I keep sticking my neck out for Kazkara in the manner that I do. I suppose the devil you know is always better than the devil you don't. Oh, but I really don't want to be thinking about devils at this moment. I've already got enough debts to pay. I think that'll be all for today. All this talk of dusty bones has made me thirsty. Let's get a drink. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next we meet, fellow traveller, have a good day.